We have our Chris Jackson. We had some difficulty connecting in the last hour, but Chris is here. I gave quite a bit of discussion about the Vibra Slim, but I'll just keep Chris over for a few minutes, and we'll get him back on next week to continue the discussion. The Vibra Slim special has been on now for several months, and I think it's what, $400 cheaper now. It's amazing. It's a remarkable machine that's been hardened and strengthened now with an amazing 3-year warranty on all parts and a lifetime warranty on the motor. Tell us about the Vibra Slim. This is, to me, a superior machine to even the Power Plate or other big vibrational machines out there that are considered the industry standard. It's a better machine. It's modular, so it's easy to fix because you just have to send the module back and you get a new module sent to you. Chris, tell us about this machine. I mean, in this deal that people have, you don't have a middleman. You have a price that's literally a third what other machines that would be comparable could provide to people. And I tell people, if you want to stay healthy during your young adult life, your midlife, or your elderly life, you have to do vibrational, I call Vibra Fit exercise. Body elastic bands and adjustable hand weights like a Bioflex weight that you can go up to 50 pounds for males and maybe half that weight or less for females. Tell us about the deal. What are people getting when they get a Vibra Slim system?
Well, the Vibra Slim, we've been in the business longer than anyone. We have a lifetime motor warranty, which no one comes close to matching, because we have the most reliable machine in the business. And like you said, the beauty with us is you're not dealing with any middle people. You're dealing with the manufacturer. So there's no ifs, ands, buts, or excuses. And on top of that, you're not paying all the middlemen's costs. So you get, a $6,000 machine for $1,299, and it's just as good quality, if not better. Because, like I said, even the more expensive companies, their machines, they charge around $8,000, $9,000. They don't do lifetime warranties.
Right. Yeah, they don't do that, do they? That's pretty amazing. And of course, because the structure of the company is set up in such a way, you don't have this giant downline line, so you don't end up having to pay many times more the price for a high quality machine that's going to last you. And if you do have technical problems with it, which is really unlikely, the modules are actually to snap apart and to send back, and you'll send a new module. You don't have to send the whole machine, which every other company requires you to send a machine, which is very expensive. Tell us about Vibra Slim. When people adjust it, how do they use it? Give us just a couple of words on how they use the machine.
Well, everyone uses it a little bit differently, but they're very easy to use. You get on the machine, and once you've been on it once or twice, you really kind of get a feel for it. Until people have got on the machine, they're not really sure what they're going to experience. When they get on it, they're like, oh, okay, I get it, and see how this machine works.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of time, unless you stand on it, you actually don't know how vigorous it exercises you. If you try to do exercise on that machine, like do a squat, or do a one-hand-legged stand where you're trying to balance yourself, or you do resistance bands where you're holding something like a weight, and you're like Bowflex weights, say 50 pounds in either hand. Your body says, you're now exercising. And of course, if that 50-pound weight is multiplied by 3.6, that 50-pound weight in each hand is close to like 190 pounds equivalent, but it doesn't have the 190-pound equivalent of danger to your body with tears and things like that. So if something as simple as, what I like to do is I like to exercise around 30 pounds per hand. So I'll take a 30-pound weight in either hand and exercise and do it overhead and in front, etc. And the effect is amazing when you're using resistance bands like the body elastic bands. So I call it Vibra Fit as opposed to CrossFit. And the Vibra Fit exercise program, I like to do 20 minutes. 20 minutes is really pretty vigorous, isn't it, when you're actually doing resistance exercise and weights. That's pretty intense, isn't it?
It really is, yeah. And, one of the things that I always like to warn people about when you're actually looking at machines, there's a lot of cheap machines out there, and they're all made in China. You want to be very wary of them, because you'll buy them, and when they do break, and they all break because they're made so poorly, we get calls all the time from people trying to ask us for parts for these other machines. No one will fix those machines. It's like you try to return a toaster at Walmart. They don't return it, they throw it out. But the thing is, these guys that you'll buy these machines from, they're not going to give you another one. You'll be stuck with a dead machine sitting in your house. And I've just heard this so many times, I can never stress it enough. Beware of the Chinese cheap-made machines. The other thing is, they're not calibrated properly. I mean, we've been in this business almost 9 years. So I mean, you can't just vibrate the body. It has to be vibrated at a proper frequency, the proper strength. The plate has to move the proper amount. So there's a lot of science that actually goes into it. And I guarantee you there's no science going into the cheaper machine. So just be aware of that.
They just knock them off. And the problem with China is they don't have respect to patents. They're sloppy in their engineering, and they use materials that are poor. And they knock them off at an incredibly low price, so then they pass them on to the consumer. They pass on a piece of junk that falls apart very quickly, or they pass it through a chain of sales, so it's at or considerably above the price of the VibraSlim, but it will fall apart on you, and that's not good.
Yeah, and that's what you hear here.
Excellent, excellent. So, again, remember, this special has been on for a while. Don't forget it. It's the holidays. It's time to get in shape. Get a VibraSlim. And if you go directly to you can either do the phone number, or better still, go directly to the Associates link on the front of Nutrimedical page. Place your order there, and you're going to get it shipped to you anywhere in the United States, free shipping charge. And you also ship worldwide as well, which is really reasonable prices to ship it anywhere on the planet. So, Chris, how does that work? If you want to ship to, say, New Zealand or Europe, what are the kinds of costs for them to get that? So we've had people do that to Ireland or Norway or other places. What kind of prices are you talking about?
Yeah, there's the shipping to Europe is about $300, $300 US.
Yeah, I think you actually have a warehouse in Europe too. So what happens is that I think we have regional warehouses around the world, so that you're not having to ship all from the U.S. Is that right?
Yeah, and we ship the 220-volt machines with the proper plug or adapters on them too.
Yeah, exactly. In other words, and that's part of the deal. You not only get the machine, you get the adapters to make sure they're properly set up so to use the proper European voltages, etc. Well, thank you, Chris, for coming back to the program again. VibraSlim, it's my exercise machine. It should be yours. If you want to stay well, you have to take vitamin G for gravity, and the best way to take it is VibraSlim. Thank you, Chris. And again, go to the front page of Nutrimedical, go down. Don't just be a looky-loo and look at it. Order it today and get yourself back in shape for the summer. Thank you, Chris. Okay, and we're going to switch over now to Ann Morrison. And Ann's got lots of news to cover, and we're going to hit the break here in a few minutes. But Ann, let's start with the top of the news stories that we have to cover today. It's a lot of information to cover today, and we need to get started.
Did you want to talk about the internet shutdown?
Yeah, what happened is, firstly, our show was attacked in the second hour, and both the power surge actually knocked out the internet, which is now still down at Genesis Network. I luckily had an ISDN, but that was also knocked out, which is a completely separate system. Now, the ISDN means Internet Service Dedicated Survival Network, which means it has its own power supply. It's completely separate. The fact that both went down in the same instant is impossible unless it was actually a cyber attack. There was no extreme weather, no lightning bolts, nothing else that would have caused a power surge, and there's no indications inside Genesis. So what happened was an actual attack. Similarly, I have a fourth hour over in the Rents Network, and the Rents Network was attacked, I believe it was an attack, because the surrounding homes and businesses and so on did not have any damage there. All of Todd Waite's equipment at Global Star Communications, which connects the European satellites, all went down on Monday, and they fried the equipment so it'll be out for days to a week. And that means Jeff's show, all the other shows on the Rents Network are down. This situation today is very unique. It's never happened at Genesis where both ISDN and the internet go down at the same time. Never. And the attack on Rents happened 5 weeks ago, and it was much worse than all of the scramble here. We are going to be bringing on Tim Alexander probably at the bottom of the hour or at a quarter to the hour, depending on how fast we get through the news. And then we'll see if we can kind of scramble to get Tim on to cover his news issues. A lot of really what I call earth-shaking news here. Let's go through the highlights of the report and then expand it, Ann. On the break, we're talking about this.
Yeah, well, the CWD is chronic wasting disease, and that's a brain wasting disease. And there's a theory that prions cause that brain wasting disease both in humans and in deer and in cows and in sheep, called Scrappy sheep. And this man, he was raising deer that he was then transferring to another parcel where people could hunt them. So he had he had quite an operation going, and everything was fine, and any of the deer that were harvested were tested for CWD, chronic wasting disease. Well, he had recently acquired another parcel of land and had opened it up for grazing for his herd replenishment, and then an older female died, 7-year-old female, and so all the deer on his property, when they die, are tested for CWD, and she had it. And we had talked about this last week, and that is that prions are thought to be shed by deer and cattle in their waste products, and these prions then contaminate the ground and ground cover. They move up into the food products that are grown on prion-infected ground, and so if you see deer sign around your garden, you need to take drastic measures to keep your garden safe from possible prions.
Right, and in fact, one of the nice things about it is that we don't have deer here locally here in Southern California, which is good because they're a major carrier of it. Let's get on to some of the other news items. The Ebola is back in Liberia. Now, this is what I call fancy verbal dancing by the media, the medical pundits, etc., and the politicians and the tourism ministries. It is an endemic disease, and the word endemic means it's embedded in the animal population. It's embedded in the bats, the monkeys, and the other rodents that are there, and they eat rodents and monkeys and bats. They call it bush meat, and the fact is that anybody eating bush meat is going to get Ebola eventually, and there's 3 different strains running around now in West Africa, which means this problem is not going to go away. The idea they try to declare that they're Ebola-free is ridiculous. Because they don't have new cases for a short period of time doesn't mean it's Ebola-free. It's endemic to the animal population, period.
That's right, and we need to be sure that, because we have people with Ebola that are being treated here in the United States, and I'm sure we all remember.
That's Obama's policy to treat a lot of these people here. They're experimenting on them, and I think it's really pretty crazy. The other issue is an issue that is the 9-banded long-nosed armadillo, and you mentioned this. And by the way, these armadilli can also transfer and actually act as a vector to snails, and snails can carry many of the different organisms, including leptospirosis, and also what's called the Chagas disease, or the spirochete that actually causes Chagas cardiomyopathy. So let's talk about this for a moment, because Mycobacteria leprae and Mycobacteria lepromatosis, or leprosy, is actually carried by these 9-banded nosed armadillos.
Right, and these 9-banded long-nosed armadillos they came out from Mexico. Now, the person that caught leprosy was in Florida, but they happen to have some of these 9-banded long-nosed armadillos there at a petting zoo, and so the public is free to touch these armadillos that can carry leprosy. Now, they don't know where that armadillo in Florida was. They don't know whether... They don't think that... They're thinking now that maybe armadillos are just not a vector, but rather just another consequence. In other words, they catch it like humans do, and they die.
Yeah,
so
and they pass it. What I heard is they actually pass it out to organisms like snails. For example, in Texas now they have endemic snails that actually carry the Mycobacteria leprae organisms, mycobacteria, which are basically a cousin of tuberculosis, and people don't realize that this is what's going on.
So you need to teach your children not to touch armadillos, and I wouldn't stop to wait and count the bands. I would just keep my hands off of all armadillos, and if they're sick, I'd definitely keep my hands off of them.
Right. Next issue is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Coronavirus, the MERS-CoV, and the World Health Organization has made a statement Tell us about that, because this is getting, you know, Saudi Arabia is, I think, they just had or are going to have the Hajj. Is that right?
Yeah, they're in the middle of Ramadan.
Right.
The Hajj will be later, but they're having pilgrims in and out of Saudi Arabia all the time.
Right, and they're endemically now have more and more aggressive forms of this virus, which is now also showing hotspots in Europe of the virus, of this particular organism, the respiratory coronavirus. And it's a very large virus, by the way. And so it's not going away. And you show a map here of the specific areas of the hotspots and the new places where they're getting super spreaders. The next is a story about this person in Thailand that got Middle East respiratory virus syndrome after going to a surgical suite. We talked about that on Friday. But people need to understand South Korea still has this roiling storm of MERS coronavirus as well at a military base there. Tell us about that.
Yeah, what I'm trying to show here is that even though there was just one person in Thailand, that in Thailand and South Korea together, that is outside of the Middle East, those two countries together, the number of males who die from it, who catch it, is much more significant than the number of females. Now, you wouldn't expect that. We might expect that in Saudi Arabia, where the women are enclosed in their homes or in veils. But in Asia, that is in Korea, most women are out and about. And so in the Middle East, it's about half and half men, half women. But in Asia, why would there be more males than females getting us? So, they're going to have to look into the genetics between somebody who's from the Middle East and somebody who's from Korea. In other words, our Orientals. SARS started in China, and then it spread around the world. So, and it killed a lot of people in China. So, are the Orientals more susceptible to coronavirus than...
Well, it seemed that the SARS coronavirus killed a lot more. I talked to virologists of infectious disease, and they said if you're from Asia, the chance of you dying in Toronto, Ontario, Canada in a hospital if you're Asian is 9 times higher than if you're Caucasian or black.
Ooh.
9 times higher if your chances of dying if you're positive for it.
Wow.
Yeah. Now the other thing is we have a story about the S1 solar storm that hit on the 27th. It did get blackouts on the poles of the Earth. We're getting increased amounts of solar storms, and they're getting increased seismic activity around the world as well. When we come back, we'll talk about the Mississippi River and how it's near flood stage, which means these weather systems are stalled over Texas and the Midwest while the West is drying out. And then one of the most important stories that got a lot of press from your blog was the London published a report in 2015, June 2015, about the food system shock potential scenario. 3 major weather events could endanger food supplies around the world. And we'll be back to discuss that with Ann when we come back, and we'll bring on Tim. We are wrapping up the news items here with Ann. There's some really interesting things going on in terms of the drought. And this is very serious, by the way. This drought is at what I call an extinction level event. And there is a solution. We have primary water. I talked to Paul Power from the Primary Water Institute here in Northern California, the top institute in the world. They've drilled all over the world in the last 60 years. There's information going back thousands and thousands of years about primary water coming from 400 to 700 kilometers down with ringwoodite. I'm going to post all the links up so people can read it themselves. You can find it from geological maps from our geotectonic grid pattern across America. So a lot of the oil drilling companies know where primary water is likely to be. You can use galvanic stimulation. I talked to Tony Aramillo, who did ground penetrating radar, and they do have the equipment for galvanic stimulation to look down as low as 3,000 feet below the ground to actually find out where the primary water is. And most of the time you're going to find it between 1,400 and 2,400 feet at the deepest, and a lot of time as shallow as 100 or 200 feet below the surface where springs come up. And let's continue on this news items, because drought is real serious, and this issue that we talked about with the Lloyd's of London published a food shocks system shock. Tell us about this, because these world climatic events, weather events, they talk about the fact that it could cause worldwide famine.
Yeah, well, if you notice there, I have provided a couple of diagrams that were in the Lloyd's of London report. One of them shows the Wheat Trade Network in 2009, and you can see that it involves Germany, France, Russia, Ukraine, Italy, Canada, and the United States, and Australia. Right. And then they supply other countries, so they're net exporters. But they also supply wheat to each other. So depending on whether the crop is good or whether there's some kind of weather anomaly. And these networks, the Wheat Trade Network is very, very complicated. So what Lloyd is saying is that, for instance, a drought, a flood in Mississippi, in Missouri, along the Missouri rivers and the Mississippi rivers, can damage the wheat, so we wouldn't have it to export. And in fact, the wheat right now in, I think it's Missouri, is growing fusarium, which is a mold. And fusarium is a biological warfare mold. It kills people. And Russia used it as a bioweapon in the 19-teens, so about 1916.
Yeah, it's been known for 100 years that fusarium will cause respiratory failure.
Yes. So I think Lloyd of London did a good job, and they said, we can't just do business as usual. What we need to do, business as usual says that the insurers set their rates based on a 200-year event, a 200-year flood, a 200-year windstorm, a 200-year drought. But we're seeing more and more of these events that don't fall into a 200-year. We might have a 200-year flood 3 years in a row. And so their model is going to have to be changed, and that might help, except that our insurance rates will probably go up.
Yeah, what I have said already, and this is not my opinion, it's based on science and prayer. Thus saith the Lord, we are now entering, after finishing the last 7 years of fat years of judgment, which happens in God's judgment, to the lean years starting this September 23rd. So this fall, not only has egg prices here in California, where we make lots of eggs, has doubled, but the prices in the Midwest and elsewhere, because of the killing of 20 million plus chickens in Iowa caused by H5N2, and the killing of 20 million turkeys, we're going to see massive food shock prices in terms of going up. And of course the feed also for other ruminating animals like cattle and sheep, that's also going to go up. So we're going to see food sticker shock happen this fall.
Yeah, I think that everybody needs to learn how to grow a garden of some sort, even if it's just one tomato plant.
Right.
And I think you should think about keeping chickens as pets.
Right. Well, we've already got that our plans with our. We've got in our gated community, we have a greenhouse, fruit, nut trees in season, so there's always some fruit there. And I have fruit growing now in my greenhouse all the time, and it's all set on an automated system. And then down the road, we have our criminal defense attorney and the DA. We already have our plans for chickens. So they've already raised chickens in the past, so we're in a rural area where we can do that. So thank God. And I've got a roof water collection system and power generation. And eventually, I'm going to put a wing generator, and I'm putting in a well after I get everything straightened away with our neighbors here, because I think it's important. The other thing that we're looking at is we're seeing the cycles of the tidal action in Vancouver and Washington, intrusion of salt water from the Pacific Ocean, wildfires burning in Canada. In fact, there's one wildfire in Washington State that's out of control. Tell us about that, because I think all these extreme weather patterns are biblical, aren't they?
Yeah, the wildfires, actually right here in St. Louis, we're getting smoke from the hundreds of wildfires in Canada. Right. And my eyes are bright. They have not called an air quality alert, which is just amazing.
Well, they're being pulled down by what's called a summer polar vortex, right?
No, if you look, if you look at the if you look at the jet stream,
yeah.
the jet stream is the straightest looking thing over the United States. It's actually traveling from north to south, right over the midsection of the country.
That's what I call a northern summer polar vortex. See, what they've done is they've set up a blocking high, and we talked to Professor McCanny about this, and we'll have him back on hopefully tomorrow if all connections work, to have him on the program in hour number 3 to talk about it, because we have solutions. to actually pull the rainwater out without even seeding it with aircraft. But what's happening is they're actually physically using the U.S. military and their advanced space-based weather systems. I took care of people employees working on U.S. Space Command on our geoengineering of our world climate and weather. This is not a joke, and I'm one of the only people that explain the specific technology and how they do it to actually modify the world weather. And they're weaponizing the weather to create famine, to create catastrophe, to create drought, and to start herding us into what's called resilient cities. We talked about this on hour number 3 on Monday with Deborah Tavares, and we'll be posting up all the links in the next few days. I'll have all those links up so people can read about resilient cities that go right back to the Rothschilds and Rockefellers and the globalists and billionaire club, I call it. Interesting. We had, of course, we talked about the anthrax, which of course shows that this is from Dugway Proving Ground, that this is a weaponized anthrax that gets sent out to all these labs. Any updates on that? And because this weaponized anthrax, they do not have a proper lab. Most of these labs are not properly set up to actually handle it. What's happened there? Anything new on that?
We don't have anything. Well, I couldn't find anything new on it, but I did leave in on the report on the update. It'll be probably on my blog tomorrow. That's twiland.info, twiland.info.
Yeah.
They were told in 2007 by Dr. Bruce Ivans that they weren't using the right calibration because it was like Chernobyl. You know, they weren't killing all the spores, or they weren't inactivating all the spores, so then they put in more and more gamma. And he said, that's not the way you do it. The way you do it is you calibrate it correctly, and you're not calibrating it. Well, you know what happened to him. They hounded him until he committed suicide.
Or he was fostericide. In other words, they killed him just like they killed these 2 doctors who are involved with autism research. Pretty nasty.
Anyway, News Today, USA Today, got a hold up through a FOIA request, that's the Freedom of Information Act request, was able to read the emails that he had sent out in 2007, and they published them. And I've got those in my blog. Right,
so you can show clearly that they persecuted him because he was releasing information. When we come back, we're going to join Tim Alexander and cover his news, and of course we'll continue on Thursday with Tim and Chris Harrison. Latest news on Fukushima and nuclear reactors around the world. Again, remember, this extreme weather puts in extreme danger, along with volcanism and earthquakes, all the nuclear reactors on Earth, including the new ones being built in China. And they're going great guns at building new, dangerous, and unstable reactors. Back in a moment. Tim, you were talking on the break about a very interesting story you've just posted up about this conjunction of Venus and what other planet that actually...
Jupiter and Venus.
That's called
a rare Bethlehem superstar tonight. And I got to tell you, I mean, in the context, and this is from the Daily Sheeple has it, but in the context, and it also comes from Christian Science Monitor, in the context of what's happening worldwide, it's, you know, if you believe like I do that Christ is going to return once we've gone through the hell of Armageddon, this is interesting. Let me read this. It's just it's a fairly short thing. Tonight, an illusion will make it appear as if the planets Jupiter and Venus have merged in the western horizon, giving off the appearance of a superstar. The sight will be visible in North America in that direction just after sunset, so you want to look to the west. Every night this month, 2 planets have appeared to get closer to one another. Tonight, they will just be 1/3 of a degree apart and appear to merge into one big, bright, shining object in the sky. Jupiter will appear circular, and Venus will form a crescent around it. Some have claimed tonight's rare planetary alignment was once responsible for the so-called Star of Bethlehem in the Bible. Star and telescope success in a similar rare concurrence of Venus and Jupiter may have been what was called the Star of Bethlehem in 2 or 3 BC. There has not been a brighter, closer planetary conjunction in the 2,000-plus years since then.
Wow, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. It's you know, it's just one of those things you say, because everything is connected, and as we talk about repeatedly, you can't understand what's going on here unless you look at the spiritual dimension.
Exactly. Now, what are the other news items that you want to touch? Because we still
there's a lot, and I'll try to cover them.
I'll let you race through them. Yeah.
Yeah, Greece came up with a last-minute proposal, and it was shot down real quick. Surprisingly, NATO member Turkey, and the Turks and Greeks tend to hate one another, but they're both members of NATO. Turkey has broken ranks with many of the NATO countries, the EU countries. It has slammed the austerity of the EU and has offered Greece aid. That's kind of a little strange. Okay, another story.
You know the reason why they're doing that? They're doing that because they're terrified because Russia and China are moving in. China's heavily invested in Greece, and Russia's offered a pipeline directly into Greece. The Chinese are going to modernize all their ports.
Yeah, but let me tell you another story that I posted yesterday. The Turks have a very large tank army now on the border with Syria. They're very concerned about the Kurds forming a separate country there, and they're threatening to enter into Syria within a that story came out.
Well, you know that northern Iraq is basically Kurdistan.
Yes.
And if Kurdistan actually was a country, it would take most of eastern Turkey, all of northern Iraq, a good chunk of Syria, all the way through to the northwestern part of Iran, which is Esfahan, the ancient capital of Media, which is, the Medo-Persian Empire. So we're seeing literally in the end time the resurrection of the Medo-Persian Empire, and the Medes are sitting on the most heavily supplied area of oil in the Middle East, which is up in northern Iraq. That's where all the oil has been found. There's an area there called the ancient area called the Eternal Fire, which is something like so many acres that's been burning for 5,000 years.
Yeah. President Putin of Russia, within hours of the basic the public announcement that the Turks were considering crossing the frontier and establishing a security zone, announced that Russia continues to be fully behind Syria and will support Syria.
Yeah, it's not going to go down. If Syria goes down, and this is where the Turkey is really asking for trouble. If Turkey tries to invade in further into Syria and cut off the port, which is the only port for the Russians, Turkey puts himself in risk of being hit with nukes. And that means Constantinople and other major centers in Turkey will be nuked flat as a pancake.
Yeah, and another story just out pertaining to all that, Iran, Iraq, and Syria are studying a strategic plan for, in effect, a joint war on ISIS.
Right, and then that means here's what's going to happen, the rise of the Medo-Persian Empire. Northern Iraq is Media, and Iran are back in alliance like the ancient first, they talk about the statue of the king of Daniel's statue. The first part of the statue, the head of gold, is the Medo-Persian Empire. All being reassembled for the end times, for the final battles.
By the way, I've got a couple more things to cover here real quick.
Yeah.
Yemeni forces have hit another Saudi base with a Scud missile attack. Last time they did that, they captured quite a number of Saudi officers and Israeli officers working in Saudi Arabia, and the head of the Royal Saudi Air Force was captured or killed. Yeah.
I think that there's also 4.5 million, what I've heard, Yemeni workers in Saudi Arabia, because it's basically a slave country, Saudi Arabia. So if they tick off the Yemenis too much, they don't just have the Houthi rebels in the mountains of northern Yemen. They literally can take over and shut down the whole country.
Yeah, they have a real security problem. What you have is a glorified tribe. The Saudi family.
Appointed by the British.
Yeah, right. Well, it was a deal, but and
it was a British deal.
Yeah.
That's a fact. Well, I call it the spade a spade.
British were the main operating arm of the Rothschild-headed global banking cartel then.
Right.
Now the United States is.
Yeah, exactly. Now the U.S., I call USA. USA's now. Or
by the way, before we run out of time here, Iran and the P5+1 talks have been extended by 1 week. The real issue is, and I'm sure this is an Israeli-driven issue, is we're demanding basically the right to go anywhere at any time unannounced in Iran and make inspections. The Iranians have said in a pig's eye. And
that's not only that. Iran is a third the size of the continental United States. It's not possible to do that kind of level of surveillance.
Well, but you know, this is a typical in-your-face Israeli move, and
it's typical Yiddish, Eastern European, thuggish, I'm a killer, you're my way kind of attitude.
Exactly. I call it the Yiddish, Eastern European gangsterism.
Right. Now, I can say this being of poetic descent. I want to see a reformation of the people in Israel because they're putting everybody in Israel, whether they're Christians, Jews, Arabs, whatever, in extreme danger. Because if a shooting war starts with Iron Dome and the Green Pirate Raider system, they have no protection. They have no protection from a war. We're not even talking nuclear. 200,000 plus conventional missiles coming in on Israel. They will not survive.
Yeah,
they will not
well,
be
I agree, and I think Green Pine and the various anti-missile systems they have been overhyped. But in any case, even if they are so wonderful that they meet the hype from Israel and the United States, so what? You have a fixed number of anti-missile missiles, and they can easily be
a number game. It's a numbers game. It's if you have not enough anti-missile systems to knock out all the barrage coming in, and you take out 10 or 15%, it's like I said to the director of Missile Defense Command coming back from White Sands when I was doing my evaluations on them, that instead of 12 really deads, you're 11 really deads.
Yeah, but you've assumed
you're still really dead. Yeah, or you're blown to bits, as they say. You remember the Smithereens? He was playing around with dynamite, and his name was Smithers. So when they picked him up and put him in a basket afterward, because you couldn't identify hardly any organs, they said, "What are those things in the basket?" He said, "They are Smithereens." That's what the nation of Israel and the people will be if we allow this foolishness of, as you say on your blog, Netanyahu and the Israelis and the global bankers to do what they want to do. They're preparing Israel as an astral sacrifice to the demonic god. Satan.
That is correct. And they will sacrifice them all to get their new world order.
Won't they? Scary stuff. We'll be back with you, Tim, on Thursday. If there's any breaking news, pop in tomorrow. We're going to be having Harley Schlanger on the first hour, third hour, Professor McCanney, Dr. Fred Graves yesterday and tomorrow in hour number 2. Coming up on Thursday, first hour, is our firing lines. If you have questions for Michelle, call our orders line, 888-212-8871, or email us at Nutrimedical.com, and we'll have those for you. We have backups of backups, so they didn't take us out too long, only a few minutes today. We're ready for you, New World Order. We're coming for you.